In the quaint suburb of Maplewood Heights, where every lawn looked like it had been manicured by angels and the paint on each house gleamed like polished pearls, there lay an invisible boundary of civility. It was a silent pact, a genteel nod to the unwritten rules of this orderly world. Yet, amidst the whispering pines and the melodic chirping of robins, there existed disruptions, small tremors of discord wrapped in the guise of human nature. Karen Blanchard, the president of our homeowners association, was the epicenter of such tremors. Her reputation preceded her, like the scent of an approaching storm. Though her voice was never raised above a polite murmur, her presence was a decree. She was the arbiter of what was acceptable. From the hue of your shutters to the frequency of your hedge trims, it was her mission. It seemed to sculpt perfection from our imperfect lives. My home was a modest abode, nestled at the end of the cul-de-sac. The sun painted its facade with a warm glow each morning, and the evening breeze would carry the scent of lilacs from my garden. Peace lived here, or so I had hoped. It was this tranquility that Karen had, unknowingly, begun to unravel. The first package went missing on a Wednesday, a day drenched in rain. It was nothing of great importance, just a book I'd been longing to read. I dismissed its absence as a simple mistake, a courier's oversight, perhaps. But then another vanished, and then another. Each disappearance was a whisper, a shadow that crept into my otherwise serene existence. Karen's signature was in the air. Her meticulous nature was no secret. Her world was one of order, and anything that disrupted that order was dealt with swiftly. My packages, arriving haphazardly and cluttering the entrance to my porch, must have irked her finely tuned sensibilities. It was petty, almost childish, yet I knew it was her. Initially, I chose patience. I imagined that the universe sought balance, that maybe these minor inconveniences were ripples in a greater plan. I checked the boxes of my mind for grievances, found few, and resolved to let it be. After all, what was a missing book in the grand scheme of things? Still, the pattern continued. Each missing package a grain of sand slipping through the hourglass of my calm. The neighborhood's perfection felt oppressive now, like a smile that didn't reach the eyes. The roses in my garden began to seem less vibrant, the sun's warmth a little colder. The realization came slowly, like the tide ebbing from the shore. This wasn't just about packages. It was about control, a silent game played on a pristine stage, with Karen as the puppet master pulling invisible strings. Her interventions were subtle reminders of who held the reins in our manicured kingdom. I pondered retaliation, something to bring a symphony of chaos to her ordered world. It would be a gentle nudge, just enough to rattle her serenity, not out of anger, but necessity, an act of balance, like the thundering applause after a silent moment in a play. I had my plan simple, yet effective. And so, the stage was set. The skunk, nature's own harbinger of disorder, would be my emissary, a fitting messenger to deliver a fragrant reply to Karen's silent incursions. It was time to see how well her pristine facade held against nature's wild unpredictability. In the end, it was about balance, a small reminder that even in the most ordered of worlds, chaos was only ever a breath away. The morning after the skunk's surprise, I awoke to the sound of an engine idling outside my window, peering through the blinds. I saw Karen's garishly colored SUV parked across the street, her figure hunched over the steering wheel, eyes fixed on my front porch, like a hawk on a field mouse. Perhaps she contemplated how embarrassment had been her companion the previous evening, or maybe she was plotting her next move. Either way, I knew the battle had just begun. Later, as the sun climbed high, casting sharp shadows on the pavement, a fresh set of notices appeared on my door. Karen, as the self-appointed queen of the HOA, had wielded her power with vigor. Each slip of paper was a testament to her newfound vendetta. A fine for grass, growing too tall by a mere inch. another for the color of my mailbox being slightly off-approved palette, and yet another for failing to remove trash cans within the designated time frame. Chatri euphorie. It was as if she'd combed through the HOA bylaws, looking for any infraction, however minute. I couldn't help but chuckle. It was almost impressive how she turned the mundane into her private arsenal, yet there was an absurdity to it all, a kind of tragic comedy in how she spent her days. If only she harnessed this energy for good, perhaps she could be a force of genuine improvement rather than petty tyranny. Around the neighborhood, whispers began to circulate, carried on the warm breeze like an illicit secret. Karen was in her element, spinning tales as silky and sticky as a spider's web. I was the unruly neighbor, disrespecting the sanctity of our shared paradise. Each nod of her head, each conspiratorial glance, seemed to lend weight to her narrative. I walked through the community, feeling the eyes of others tracing my steps, their gazes heavy with judgment or pity. It didn't matter which. Both were unwelcome guests. Yet I kept my head high, determined not to let her weave me into her tapestry of control. And so, the absurdity continued. Lawn care trucks appeared on my street more frequently than delivery trucks. Each time, Karen would emerge from her house, clipboard in hand, eager to assess the minutiae of my compliance. Her diligence was relentless, her dedication to the cause unwavering. Yet, ironically, it only fueled my resolve. In the quiet sanctuary of my home, I pondered my next move. Karen's antics were escalating, and while they were more laughable than threatening, I knew they couldn't be left unchecked. The key, I realized, was patience, like waiting for the perfect time to catch a wave. I needed to bide my time. Let her tire herself out on this fruitless campaign of intimidation. My mind drifted to thoughts of escalation, of ways to turn her own rules against her. But I knew better than to rush into action. Her web of absurdity was intricate, but not impenetrable. All it required was a single thread to unravel it, and I was more than willing to be the one to pull it. For now, I would let her think she was winning, let her believe she had the upper hand. There's a certain art in letting your opponent underestimate you, in feigning retreat. After all, the best surprises are the ones you never see coming. The sun slipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across the cul-de-sac as I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the monitor. The tiny camera hidden in the shrubbery had caught her red-handed again. Karen, the HOA president with a personal vendetta against deliveries that weren't hers, carried off yet another package with the grace of a cat burglar, except she wasn't stealing jewels, just the mundane pieces of life meant for her neighbors. Each box she left untouched felt like an accusation. Each one she took a victory in her silent war against our happiness. My plan was ready. It was time for a skunk to take center stage. The package was innocuous enough, wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with the kind of string you'd find on a child's birthday gift. Inside, a carefully concealed compartment held the most potent skunk essence I could find. It was a challenge to acquire, a stinky undertaking requiring more research than I care to admit. I wanted it to be a surprise, unexpected, unforgettable. Night wore on, the kind that makes whispers seem louder, and I couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. A grown woman, reduced to playing childish games of thievery. Why control? Perhaps, or maybe just boredom in a life that had offered her too few avenues for mischief. I checked my watch. Any moment now, the neighborhood was quiet. A sleeping beast, to which Karen imagined herself the master. The air was thick with anticipation. Or maybe that was just paranoia. I felt like a predator, lying in wait for the perfect moment to spring the trap. The camera feed flickered, and there she was. Her silhouette moved with practiced ease, her eyes darting about like twin searchlights. She approached the bait with the confidence of someone who believed herself invisible. I leaned closer, my heart keeping time with her footsteps. She reached for the box, her greedy fingers brushing the surface with the gentleness of a lover's caress. The moment stretched, taut and electric, until she finally lifted it, cradling it like a trophy. She turned, her triumphant smile caught in a flash of streetlight. It was done. As she walked away, the satisfaction was undeniable, not from a desire to humiliate, but from knowing she would finally get a taste of what she'd been dishing out. The irony wasn't lost on me. In the end, her theft would become her downfall. The next morning, the neighborhood buzzed with an unspoken energy. Windows cracked open slightly, curtains fluttering as eyes peered out with barely contained curiosity. An unfamiliar stench permeated the air, clinging to everything like a bad memory. It was unmistakable and inescapable, a testament to nature's own brand of justice. Karen's house was quiet, blinds drawn tight like the closed eyes of someone refusing to face the world. The world she had tried to control had turned its back on her, leaving her with only the acrid reminder of her own folly. I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, a sense of peace settling over me. The world felt balanced again, as if some cosmic scales had finally tipped in our favor. Karen would think twice before taking what wasn't hers, or maybe she wouldn't, but that was a problem for another day. For now, the neighborhood hummed with a newfound harmony, the kind that only comes after a storm has passed, leaving behind clear skies and the faint, lingering scent of skunk. The sun had barely begun its lazy descent when the first whispers started to ripple through the neighborhood. I watched from my window, the lace curtain a veil between me and the street, as Mrs. Dobbins paused on her afternoon walk, her eyebrows, twin tufts of disbelief, arched up as she lingered by Karen's front porch, her wrinkled nose twitching in curiosity or perhaps revulsion. Even from a distance, the pungent miasma of skunk hung heavy in the air, an invisible cloud marking the scene of the crime. Karen's house, once pristine with its manicured hedges and symmetrical flower beds, stood as a monument to her unraveling. The front steps, usually immaculate, were sullied now, bearing the faint brownish stains of attempted cleanup. A few doors down, the Simons kids abandoned their bicycles in the driveway and tiptoed closer, their expressions a mix of fascination and fear. They were drawn to the spectacle like moths to a flame, heedless of the impending burn. I felt an unexpected pang of guilt, a fleeting shadow that darted across my conscience before being swallowed by the satisfaction of justice served. The skunk had done its job, leaving behind not just a smell, but a statement. Sometimes, consequences were as inevitable as the setting sun. As the shadows stretched longer, the neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Karen emerged, her composure crumbling like the brittle leaves beneath her feet. Her meticulously styled hair fell limp, a casualty of the chaos. Her eyes, usually cold as steel, now darted around nervously, seeking refuge in the familiar faces that offered none. The skunk's legacy lingered around her like a persistent ghost, refusing to be exorcised. Neighbors passed by, offering tight-lipped smiles or exaggerated coughs. There was a newfound tension in the air, a shift in the rigid social structure Karen had so fiercely maintained. Her power, once absolute, was cracking under the weight of communal scrutiny. Even the air seemed to buzz with a quiet rebellion, the unspoken acknowledgement that the emperor had no clothes, or at least no scent-free ones. From my vantage point, I observed the slow unraveling, each thread of Karen's facade being meticulously unwoven by her own past misdeeds. There was a certain symmetry in it all, a poetic justice. She, who had preyed on vulnerability, was now exposed. As evening settled in, the streetlights flickered to life, casting pools of warmth on the cool pavement. I let the curtain fall back into place, retreating from the world outside. In the quiet of my living room, I pondered the nature of retribution. It had been tempting to delight in Karen's downfall, to embrace the irony of her predicament. Yet, beneath the satisfaction lay a deeper recognition the realization that revenge, however sweet, often left a bitter aftertaste. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories. The cycle of petty grievances and suburban politics would continue. But tonight, the neighborhood lay in a fragile truce, the air rich with possibilities. I settled into my chair, the soft upholstery embracing me like an old friend, and allowed myself a small, private smile. After all, sometimes even a skunk serves a purpose. The courtroom was surprisingly quiet, a solemn cathedral of justice where I found myself seated with an odd sense of calm. My counsel sat beside me, a fortress of calm efficiency. Across the aisle, Karen fidgeted, her facade of impervious arrogance slipping into a mask of irritation and unease. This wasn't how I imagined our final act would unfold. Yet here we were, in the stark, sterile embrace of legality. Weeks of meticulous documentation and quiet observation had led to this moment a simple civil suit, a minor piece of paper that carried the weight of all her transgressions. I thought of the skunk, a creature of nature's own ironic justice, and the way it had transformed Karen's weekly pilfering into an unforgettable spectacle. The memory of her shriek, though distant, still tickled a corner of my mind, a mischievous sprite dancing through recollection. Yet, it was this sterile room, these sterile proceedings, that offered true satisfaction. The real revenge, I'd realized, was never in the chaos of a single moment, but in the quiet unraveling of a pattern, long ignored. Karen's lawyer rose, trying to weave a tapestry of misunderstanding and unfortunate coincidence. It was almost fascinating how words could be spun so thin, stretched until their substance nearly vanished. But facts are stubborn things, and ours were unyielding. The paperwork was irrefutable. Over time, every stolen package, every misappropriated parcel, had become a thread in a tapestry of evidence, security footage, neighborhood testimonies, and a meticulously kept log flayed the layers of her deception with precision. As Karen's lawyer spoke, I found my thoughts drifting to the neighborhood itself, a seemingly idyllic enclave veiled in the norms of suburban harmony. Karen had thrived in its shadows, her authority an unspoken rule backed by a slavish adherence to HOA regulations. Yet, beneath this facade, a current of discontent had simmered, subtle, yet undeniable. It was this quiet rebellion I had tapped into, and now, as the tide turned, I felt its strength. The judge interrupted my reverie, his voice a neutral gavel in the quiet room. The verdict was swift, a simple decree of restitution and community service. It was a measured response, not the fiery retribution of myth, but it was enough. The law, in its methodical way, had set things right. As the session concluded, I caught Karen's eye. There was a flicker of something there, a recognition perhaps, or maybe a defiant spark refusing to be extinguished. But it didn't matter. The cycle had ended, the balance restored. Outside, the sun hung low, casting long shadows over the courthouse steps. I felt their familiar weight. But there was light too, a new beginning, perhaps, or simply the relief of an ending. The neighborhood would return to its rhythms, the unseen dances of life, continuing their intricate patterns, and Karen, I hoped, would find the quiet reflection that justice sometimes demands. I walked away, leaving behind the echoes of the courtroom. There was work to be done, a garden to tend, and in its soil, the promise of growth. Life, after all, is a series of stories, each unfolding at its own pace, in its own time. And as one chapter closes, another begins, written in the quiet moments of resolve and reflection. The morning after the skunk incident dawned with an eerie tranquility, the kind that settles in the bones before a storm. I woke to a symphony of frantic whispers and the shuffling of feet outside my window. the kind of murmured excitement that only a scandal can ignite. The skunk's odorous retribution had struck its intended target with impeccable precision. Karen's fortress of manicured hedges and surveillance cameras now stood as a testament to her downfall. The neighborhood bloomed with a renewed sense of camaraderie, an unspoken understanding that justice, in its own pungent way, had been served. Stepping outside, the air was cooler, hinting at autumn's approach. I noticed clusters of neighbors gathered in small huddles, their eyes alight with the kind of curiosity that signals a shift in power. Karen's pristine white porch, usually a stage for her self-proclaimed authority, was conspicuously empty. The absence of her intrusive presence was a silent victory. I moved through the street, each step a quiet celebration. The air here felt different, freer, as if the very atmosphere had shrugged off Karen's oppressive reign. The whispers grew louder as I approached the corner where the neighborhood busybodies usually convened. They parted for me with nods of approval, acknowledging my quiet rebellion. In the days that followed, Karen's influence waned like a tide receding into the ocean. She had become a shadow of her former self, her attempts at regaining control thwarted by the community's newfound unity, her once commanding voice now a mere whisper in the wind. The homeowners' association meetings, once battlegrounds of petty disputes and power plays, transformed into forums of cooperation and goodwill. The neighborhood felt like a family again, bonded by an unspoken pact to keep the peace Karen had long disrupted. We became architects of our fate, each small decision, a brick in the foundation of our restored community. Ironically, it was in Karen's absence that her influence was most felt. Her overbearing presence had been the catalyst for our unity. In trying to control us, she had inadvertently empowered us, a lesson wrapped in the pungent reminder of the skunk's visit. Life resumed its gentle rhythm, and the street pulsed with life and laughter. Packages arrived safely on doorsteps, and neighbors exchanged pleasantries without the fear of being overheard or judged. The community thrived, each home a sanctuary of its own making. As for Karen, she became a relic of our past, a cautionary tale told over backyard fences. Her skunk surprise had been a turning point, a moment where the community chose to stand together rather than apart, her power stripped away like paint on a neglected wall. And so, in the aftermath of her downfall, we planted flowers where once there was only suspicion and distrust. Our neighborhood, now vibrant and alive, was a testament to resilience and the quiet power of unity. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was ours all along, a community bound not by force, but by choice, a victory wrapped in the fragrant bloom of redemption.